Hello and welcome to Reality Check. I'm Ross Coulthart, and today we have an intriguing story. UAPs recorded and analysed off the coast of Long Island, just to the east of New York. Two twin brothers, Jerry and John Tedesco, are Long Island natives. Both of them are electrical engineers. They're both passionately interested in science, and as it happens, they also have a very close interest in UFOs, UAPs. Now, they're concerned a few years ago about possible cancer clusters on Long Island, and so they build a mobile lab in an RV to monitor atmospheric smog and to also research electromagnetic emissions such as those from cell phone towers. But in 2021, as they're making their research plan, they read the report from the Office of the Director of National Intelligence. That's America's intelligence boss, the chief intelligence czar in the United States. And the ODNI made an extraordinary declaration back in 2021 that after 70 years of denial about the existence of the reality of UFOs, not only did the ODNI confirm they are real, they acknowledged they are. UAPs are a threat to flight safety and a possible risk to national security. And it's fair to say this finding by the ODNI sent their research in a completely different and, as it happens, very fruitful direction. John and Jerry teamed up with another Long Island native, Donna Lee Nardo, a journalist, investigator, and professional communications expert who's also interested in science and UFOs. They started in 2022 and they continued through to July 2023. And in August this year, they achieved the almost impossible task of getting a field research study on UFOs, UAPs, off the coast of Long Island, peer-reviewed and published in the Open Journal of Applied Sciences. Their report, which is now a book called Nightcrawler Eye on the Sky, is groundbreaking. And I know their research has captured the attention of some very influential scientists and officials, including in Homeland Security and the FBI, who at the moment do not publicly acknowledge their very, very close interest in this subject. They're looking much closer at the UAP mystery than they currently care to publicly admit. And if you see just how close this site where the Tedescos have been viewing just off the coast of North Long Island is to, say, the approaches to JFK International Airport, and of course one of America's biggest cities, New York City, you'd understand why there is a public interest national security risk here. So the Journal of Applied Sciences paper presents the findings from their 10-month field study at the Robert Moses State Park on the south shore of Long Island. Their objective was to determine if unknown aerial phenomena existed over this coastal location, and if so, to study it. And boy, have they done well. I want to tell you about a product that happily is sponsoring Reality Check, and which also addresses some of the egregious food that you Americans happen to eat. And it's all about the Gut Cleanse BioComplete 3. The theory that is pushed by the Gut Cleanse BioComplete 3 product is that there is a potential toxin in all of the, quote, healthy foods that scientists have been telling us to eat with a fraudulent food pyramid for some considerable time. One day I will do a story on Reality Check about the American ultra-processed food diet and why I fear for this beautiful country that it seems to be suffering from the appalling food that it eats, and it needs a fix. Well, maybe that fix is the Gut Cleanse BioComplete 3. There's a Dr. Gundry, a world-renowned cardiologist, who is saying that there's a potential toxin in our food that's causing huge digestive issues, and it's affecting millions of people worldwide. The warning signs include weight gain, fatigue, digestive disorder, stiff joints, even skin problems. And Dr. Gundry explains that these side effects are often mistaken for normal signs of aging because digestive issues develop usually over a matter of years and sometimes even decades. And I can assure you that the damage that we're talking about is probably caused by these supposed health foods, and it's far from normal. The good news is you can fix this problem from your own home. It's very simple. You just have to know which foods are actually healthy and which contain this hidden potential toxin. So you can find this yourself at the gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. That's gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross. And if you go there, you'll find that after years of research, Dr. Gundry has decided to release an informative video to the public for free, and it's uninterrupted, showcasing exactly which foods you need to avoid. Go find that video at gutcleanseprotocol.com/Ross and click on the link in the description below. Okay, let's get into the show. So, guys, welcome to Reality Check. And I suppose to kick off, how far away is this site where you were doing your study from the location that Navy pilots off the east coast of the US were seeing anomalous objects frequently, and as I understand it, still do?
Well, first of all, it's a privilege to be here, Ross.
Yeah, absolutely.
For all of us. And the Navy sightings were, I believe, down around the Virginia area. And further down, I guess, Jacksonville, off the coast of Jacksonville, Florida. Whiskey
72 was the Virginia area.
Right, is what they classified it as.
The training area.
The information that we have and what we've heard back from Ryan Graves is that, these things have been spotted literally 10 miles off the shore of Virginia and further out. Objects moving, east to west. I'm sorry, west to east in this case. Nothing that moved back over land. So we had chosen Robert Moses State Park because the island extends literally from the main coastline, New Jersey, and the city, about 140, 150 miles. From the coast, and where we're situated, we're roughly about 55 miles at that point. So we're looking 55 miles out at sea in a southwest direction, and literally about 55 miles from the deep water trench. So we have a pretty good vantage point, especially using our long range sensors, the X-band radar system that we have, that we got FCC clearance for as experimental use, and some of the hyperspectral cameras.
Let's cut to the quick. Donna, maybe you can answer this.
Yes.
Let's do some quick, short answers. Are these objects, you all believe, intelligently controlled on the basis of the evidence you've uncovered?
I think that there is a possibility that indeed they are, and I think John, Jerry, and I feel that way.
Are they a technology?
I think that there's a possibility that is definitely among the numerous possibilities, and I think, again, that's a hypothesis that John, Jerry, and I share.
And I'll throw this one open to all of you. Is this evidence of a non-human intelligence?
I think it's potential evidence of non-human intelligence. I mean, it appears to show awareness. It appears to show some intelligent actions. At times, occasionally you'll see it meander along the shoreline, these objects, or they'll loiter along the shoreline. But they also would also show an awareness of us being out there,
Yeah,
and actually responds to some of the things we're doing.
Right. And we've used LiDAR. We've used long-range torches, both visible light and invisible light, the infrared, and we've had reactions. We have almost like a form of acknowledgement or communications.
So when you say acknowledgement, what do you mean? What happens?
So in one particular case, we had an object that once we hit it with a infrared torch, we noticed that in the night vision cameras, this object suddenly moved its position away from the torch.
It seemed to evade
it evaded the light, and it did it several times.
Look, my favorite video of all of the ones you've got, and it's called the Peekaboo video.
Yes.
Um, and there's a road sign. Is this shot on infrared? There's a road sign, and you see a whitish orb coming out from behind the road sign. So obviously not far away from you. It's on the beach, and it seems to be coming out, peeking at you, and then tucking back behind the sign again.
Yes, yes, it was very unusual that night. We were just preparing the instrumentation and setting up the infrared cameras, and we noticed in the recording that the cameras itself had recorded an object that literally appeared from the right side of the sign. And as I moved the camera back to that direction, because I caught this in the camera at the corner of my eye, and I said I saw something, and I tracked this object. As I focused the camera on it, the object moved suddenly behind the sign again. And it did this several times. As I moved the camera away, the object came out from behind the sign, and then was basically chasing it back and forth.
So that's an object that appears to know you're working with some kind of camera technology. It knows it's being monitored and it's trying to avoid being captured on camera.
That's what we believe. Yes, yes, that it did acknowledge, that it was being videotaped, or it's being tracked in some way, and it did try to evade that track.
And it did this about 4 times.
Mhm.
And Ross, this was a few months into phase one study. So these, whatever this phenomena is that we witnessed over and over again at that site, it had come to know us, but especially John, because John torched it with the high, heavy lights, and then these objects sometimes, as you said before, would react, they would blink, they would move away. So uh, I think that basically it was trying to communicate or give a notice to John, because it was John who spotted it.
Mhm. Right.
So
And
one thing I'm really interested in is there's a video that isn't within the period of your field study, but you very kindly shared it with me. It was shot, I think, on the 15th of July this year, and it appears to show a cube-like, certainly a polyhedral object, and you've hit it with a LiDAR, which is a laser that can detect and range. It's a remote
Mhm.
sensing method. So you shine
Yes.
a LiDAR at it. What happens? Describe it to me.
Yes. So what happened is we had a refraction or reflection at times from this object. And the odd part about it is that the distance that was given back on the reflection didn't really make a lot of sense. It didn't correspond to an object that I initially thought was about, better than 500 meters from where I was. But I hit it twice in a clear line of sight, and the reflection back in both cases showed about 45 feet from where I was standing, which did make a whole lot of sense.
Was it 45 feet away?
It was not 45 feet. It had to have been much further than that. Why I got that kind of reflection back, is still kind of a mystery, and we're wondering whether this has something to do with gravitational lensing or some kind of distortion around these objects that is producing it.
Now, that's interesting in the implications because if it is gravitational lensing, it suggests that whatever the object is, it has a technology that's capable of distorting space-time, which of course is the long speculated Alcubierre theory to explain how these objects might be able to
Yeah.
move. Um, can I ask you this? Does the LiDAR allow you to assess whether the object had mass? Could it not just be a ball of plasma or perhaps some ball lightning or something like that?
That's difficult to say. I mean, a reflection from the object would indicate that there was some mass there,
Mm-hmm.
but we don't know in what form. If it's more of a gaseous state, or if it's there's some solid to it. But there were times that we did get reflections, and other times we could get a reflection. It actually looked like the lidar beam itself uh, was never really making contact,
Right.
and almost in a form of distortion around it.
It sounds to me like you've got a non-human intelligence biting at your heels underneath the table there. Is that a little puppy or something you've got under the desk there?
Yes, yes. Just dying to get out here.
I feel the need to explain that to our audience. Otherwise, they're going to wonder what those
Yes.
strange noises are.
Sorry.
Um, Can I just double check? There's an aeronautical chart in what you sent me, which shows your area of interest. And there's a big circle in red. And the thing I found interesting about this chart is it highlights, in my opinion, why UAP detection and monitoring matters and why good science, good research like yours into this phenomenon matters. Because where you are located, your area of interest, signaled by that circle of red on the chart,
Mhm.
that's one of the approach routes, isn't it, into JFK? That's an extraordinarily busy aircraft corridor. I don't understand how you guys can be seeing dozens of weird anomalous objects that apparently have mass moving around in an aircraft corridor, and this isn't a flight safety national security issue.
Right. It's we've seen this since we started this research, and we've been carefully examining the flight corridor. Now you have JFK to the west of us, and you have other airports, especially in Connecticut, doing a flyover. You have MacArthur Airport. You have LaGuardia as well to the west. So we have a very busy corridor of flights. But we've also seen these objects. We've seen these objects in in combination with air travel. We'll be out there with a hyperspectral cameras, and we'll record these objects that seem to be at times in the flight paths of these aircraft.
Well, actually, there is one object.
The
What?
Tic
What?
Tac.
Yeah. Well, there is the Tic Tac object, which is extraordinary. I mean, you basically show, and it does. It looks like a Tic Tac underneath an aircraft. A cylindrical object passes right beside an aircraft at speed during the day. It's a very clear image. And the slow mo at around about 49 seconds shows how close it came to the aircraft. I held my breath when I saw this because I thought, one, you've captured a Tic Tac, and two, it's right beside an aircraft. I'm not surprised that Homeland Security and FBI and other agencies are interested in your work.
Another interesting feature of that video is in one frame of it, we had noticed that there was a flash, and when we froze it in that frame, you could see the object has a club shape to it, the larger end in the direction of travel, and it had two lights on the surface, or two shiny reflective surfaces or very reflective surfaces on top of it. And it only did this in one frame. It looked like it changed its orientation, and these two spots appear to be lights on it, but it's very different from an aircraft. It's got an odd shape to it. It's got this club shape to it.
Right. And what Gerald said too, it's only in one frame. Out of that 45 seconds, it's only in one frame of video that we saw this. So it's not navigation lights which have a regular pattern to them, flash pattern. And that's predictable. We'll see that with most aircraft. This also had a reflective silhouette to it, almost like it would appear to be white, and you could see the rising sun underneath it. You could see the orange glow from the sun.
Give me a big picture here. You did this study over 10 months at this Robert Moses State Park on Long Island, just to the east of New York. How many objects of an anomalous nature did you see? And what's your rough conclusion? I mean, what do you think this is?
So in this case here, we've seen one that appeared to be almost like a tic tac shape. Most of the objects we've been seeing look like this, what we call spheroids, with a polyhedron center to it, something that looks like a cube or a rotating cube of some sort.
So this is very similar to the object described by FA-18 pilot Ryan Graves and his colleagues that were being seen by Navy pilots off the East Coast, just a bit further south, off the coast of Virginia. You're seeing, have you seen the phenomenon of I think it's the cube within the sphere?
what we've been seeing is it's more of a polyhedral shape to it, but depending on how many sides this polyhedron has, I mean, it could you could have a side that looks perfectly square and lit up, and if it's the more sides it has, the more rounder it becomes. So it could look like a sphere around a cube.
Right, and the spin rate is variable too. It's not, we've seen them rotate at a relatively slow pace, and then other times we'll see them where they seem to almost speed up. They accelerate, and when they accelerate, they get brighter and they almost look like they give off this intense light, this spheroid light, which it's the colors vary from orange, white, red, green. We've seen, and they can be pretty intense.
Can I ask, is there a do you ever see these objects with kind of a plasmatic hue around them, some kind of aura around them?
Yes,
A lot of scientists I've spoken to say that if there is a propulsion system, you might see a purplish hue. Have you seen that?
yes, yes. As a matter of
In fact,
fact,
we have
go
doing a
ahead.
video of one with a bluish or purplish hue around it.
Yeah, it's in a video, but we also have a UVC detection on it.
Hmm.
Now, the UVC is an ultraviolet C-band detector. These are very sensitive binary detectors, and we've had it out there. And in this particular case, while observing the object, our detector went off several times, indicating that there was a UV energy that was coming off of this object. UV is indicative of a plasma or some kind of a discharge, an arc of some sort that's giving off this particular wavelength.
Did you pick up any gamma radiation, any dangerous ionizing radiation?
Nothing like that. That might have been too far from it, maybe distance wise, but we were always monitoring for the higher energy radiation for alpha, beta, gamma, and so forth. That's not something that we were able to indicate.
Donna, can you do the broad brush for me? I'm really interested in getting a summary, a short encapsulating paragraph that summarizes the scope of your work and how many objects, how many anomalous events you recorded. Can you give me that rough pen sketch?
Well, I will say, with evidence to back up, 50, because we have approximately 50 video clips of various phenomena that we put into the bucket because of investigating all other options that they're unknowns. So while we may not know for sure what they are, we know they're not anything that's prosaic. They're not not an airplane. It's we don't think that any of them were drones, at least not drones in the normal sense of drone, because no flashing lights, no sound. John's acoustics, Jerry's acoustics would pick that up, be able to see the flash.
Right. And what I do want to say too is that, we spent a good portion of this research looking for prosaic explanations for this stuff. So we examined, a lot of the flight travel, the various different aircrafts, the engine sounds, and
We,
we categorized a lot of that stuff.
yeah.
And like I said, we spent, I would say, probably at least 6 months making the determination whether or not it was a commercial aircraft, or something that we could, with a biomass of some sort, birds, bats, insects. So we tried to isolate as much as we could before putting this into that other bucket.
And one of the first things we did is we did an assessment of the scene. We actually mapped the flight corridor of the airport, which is 38 miles to the west. So most of the time we would steer away from that area. If it was, and most of the time we would spend most of our observations after 12, or most of the air flights would diminish down to virtually nothing.
And
And
that's
we
what
were still
we
seeing these objects.
phenomena was during that after 12, those after 12
Yes.
hours.
Right. The bulk of it, yes.
There
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
outliers. But one other thing is John and Jerry, when they first started building the Nightcrawler, the telemetry vehicle, the platform to observe, and with all the sensors that we take to these beach sites to do the study. Um, John lives near an airport, so John spends considerable time also just hovering around that area, because you can look up into the sky, and they studied the planes, they studied the tracks, they studied the sounds, they studied how it looks with this camera, how it looks with the IR camera, how it looks with the planetary camera. So they had a pretty good idea of what would be a plane in the sky before we even got to Robert Moses State Park.
Right. From our vantage point, especially where we live, it's all you do is look at planes.
Sure.
Yeah, it gave us an advantage. Yeah.
Yeah.
Even found some anomalies because they was showing me charts before the project got started. It was just in the preliminary stages. They were building the first Nightcrawler platform, and they were seeing things in the sky around the airport that they were already able to differentiate from a plane, from a helicopter.
Mhm.
You know what I find hilarious is you guys have essentially become the UAP Ghostbusters vehicle. This RV of yours sounds legendary. Tell me what you've got in there in the way of scientific equipment. It's quite an extraordinary vehicle, I understand.
Yes, and so it's it was quite a creation from some start to, well, not quite finished yet, but it's still growing.
There was actually two versions of it.
Yeah, and this is the second version. The first version was actually built too high, had too much weight. It's the vehicle you couldn't get out of its own way.
There's
So
point
we
three.
ended up we ended up with a regular RV, a 30-foot RV, and we kind of gutted it out. We put the equipment in there. Actually built a Faraday cage around it. Believe it or not. It's a metal mesh built within the walls, the floors, the ceiling,
And
and once everything's
just
closed,
explain why you would build a Faraday cage, just for our
yeah.
audience.
So a Faraday cage was basically to isolate the equipment from any external EMI, external emissions, radio emissions. We wanted to make sure that it wasn't influencing our measurements. Like I said, once this thing is closed up, everything from the external, even cell phones, your cell phone signal would pretty much die out once the door is closed. And this was necessary in order to safeguard our data. We collected a lot of data over that period of time, and we found early on that even some of the acoustic data was being interfered with radio frequencies, because you got 5G cell towers down there they're working at these momentary high power levels, these peak power levels, and they could actually induce a radio frequency into a microphone, and it would sound like audio. It would sound like it's an acoustic tone, but it's not. It's actually being picked up by the EMI.
So the crucially important thing here is that, like the US Navy with the Nimitz incident, you've not just taken video and used the A1 human eyeball to witness these objects.
Mm-hmm.
You've also used hyperspectral imaging cameras. You've got wideband marine radars, which you've actually got two, so you can cross-reference. You can what do you call triangulate those radars
Triangulars,
for more
yeah.
accurate image. You've got different types of UV camera, infrared camera. Give me, what else have you got? Like, I mean, how much
So
did this cost you? It must have been a phenomenal amount of money to even buy a
it's
hyperspectral camera.
It was approximately probably about close to $250,000.
Yeah, maybe a little bit more by this time. It's
And of
probably
course, we
closer
kept
to about
spending after that,
275, but
updating.
it's, of course, we're continually updating the course, and a lot of it came out of my retirement.
I was
It's
about to say, what do your long-suffering wives say about you spending the retirement fund on this UAP passion project?
she says you better get busy with this project.
Luckily, we did get a funder that helped us.
Yes, that's
As
true.
because that money was running low, we did get a funder who believed in what we were doing, and he funded us the rest of the way to finish up the phase one project.
Right. It was the same funder that helped with the Galileo project with Harvard University.
Do you want to acknowledge that funder if they want to be publicly acknowledged? I think it's important.
I would love to. I mean, I think he's a phenomenal person. His name is Eugene Jung, and
Great human being.
great human being, and he's got a big interest in this stuff and science in general, and promoting it and the cause. And he's also been very helpful during the virus outbreak. He's helped a lot of different causes. But he's given a lot. He's given a lot back to society.
Donna?
A lot of money was spent for phase one study. A lot of money is needed to continue phase two and beyond. But there are university endeavors right now at the university level trying to approach some of the same objectives we have. And we have results. We have data. We have a published paper. We have a book. And we're continuing to look for funding for the phase 2 study, which we have a lot of new objectives that we'd like to tackle. And some of these other university endeavors are asking for millions, have received millions. And so we were able to fulfill the phase 1 study with data that was recognized in a scientific journal and has attracted the interest of the FBI's expressed an interest in our work. State and local government has expressed an interest in our work. First responders, we're working, collaborating with them. It goes on and on and on. And
Yeah.
we updated the academic community, who also has been very supportive,
Mhm.
but we've not received any funding, the same type of funding at the level of the academic endeavor.
Right, and we remain transparent too to everything that we find. Any finding that we have, it's we're trying to be transparent, and we like collaboration and feedback from other, from academia, especially, there's other professionals. There's we work with pilots, and of course, law enforcement and that sort of thing. But it's not something that we want to keep under wraps, and we try to get that information out there. And early on we did it through a book.
So to finish my point, we do these types of studies evidently at a fraction of the cost and produce results. We hope also in the second phase.
I,
And
I totally agree with you, Donna. I mean, one of the reasons I'm so keen to get you guys on is because what you've shown is that good citizen science can actually make breakthroughs. I find the work that you've done very, very exciting. And I want to get into the nitty gritty of that now. One of the things that you talk about in your report, your radio frequency report, is that there's a spike at 4.06 gigahertz. And it doesn't seem to be a broadband frequency. It's not anything like Wi-Fi, 4G, or 5G. Do you think that spike is associated with the anomalous phenomenon that you've been videoing?
It's hard to say. We're unfortunately you know we're nearby, cell towers, 5G cell towers that are giving out pretty strong signals, and a lot of them. Some of these signals are spread spectrum. They're random, but there are a couple of signals that during times of higher traffic with the observations, we've noticed carriers around 1.6 gigahertz and 3 gigahertz. And these are the signals that we're really kind of focusing on at this point. Some of the other signals, they could be GPS. There are law enforcement communications as well that we're intercepting, but it's at times it's very difficult to isolate the background noise from all these other signals. Like I said, the ones that we're really focused on right now is the two in particular, which is the 3 and the 1.6.
So you are seeing something in the 3 gigahertz range, which of course is a well-known mysterious range.
Yes, yes,
And we're seeing it correlates actually when these objects seem to appear.
right.
So the 3 gigahertz range that's been, I think it's also the range that's been picked up at the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah. You're seeing something anomalous in that frequency range as well.
Right, right. And what's tricky about that signal too is that there's some radar, especially where we're close to the water. There's ships that use a very similar frequency range, which is S-band radar. S-band radar is anywhere between 2.9 and 3.1 gigahertz. So we're very careful as to try to isolate that from these erroneous signals that we've been getting. And there are times that these ships are not within 36 miles of our location, and we're still receiving some of these signals with this higher activity.
Yep.
Now, I want to squeeze into this program as many of the videos and images as possible so that our audience can see some of the excellent work that you've done. You see 4 orb objects over the ocean from the beach. Just talk me through what we're seeing on that video. Can you just describe it to me? What are we seeing on that video? One appears to be in the water. There's an object either in the water or just above it. And then
Okay.
I think it's you, John. You say there's a shadow of something dark that you can see at the back. And then
I believe that was Jerry.
Yeah.
that was Jerry.
Actually, that particular shadow is actually an artifact produced by the IR. It's almost
Right.
what the mountain climbers called Brock inspectors, but in our case, it's produced by an IR instead of a fog.
But there was something anomalous that happened.
Yes.
Tell me what happened.
Yes, there's what you talk about. We actually saw an orb of light. So one of the spheroids we're talking about. There was one hovering low over the water. It was actually casting a reflection on the water. And it was changing its elevation periodically. It was also changing its spin rate. As it spun faster, it increased its luminosity. As it decreased its spin rate, the luminosity would drop, and you would almost start to see that polyhedral appearance. There was also about four or five other objects that appeared, and all of them were in different spectral ranges. The only one that was visible was the one on the water, and this is what we thought may be some kind of signature management or their ability to change spectral
Right.
range.
The objects that were basically over the water, uh, you know, low over the horizon, were in the infrared. They were being detected in the infrared. They couldn't be seen visibly by any of us. The only object that we could see clearly and it was very visible was the object that was over the water. We approximated it was roughly about 13 feet, and it was casting a light that was the seas were pretty calm at that point, and you could see this rotation of this light under the object itself.
It was very intense, very intense.
There's another video 4. It's an orb with satellites. A big purplish orb has a whole lot of little orbs around it, and they're
Mhm.
strobing like crazy. I mean, it's quite an
Mm.
extraordinary video. Can you talk me through that?
Yeah, that's one that would appeared off the shoreline. We noticed the large orb in the middle was actually we could actually make that out visibly. It was both in the visible and IR range. The smaller orbs or the smaller satellite orbs were all in the infrared. Those we couldn't see with our eyes.
Right, and something else I want to say too is that we were tracking this on the main monitor, the main video monitor inside the RV. And what we do is we want to make sure that these are not star constellation, part of a constellation star pattern. So we used stellarium mapping, and there's a couple of other utilities we used as well out there in the field. And what we'll do is we use a dry erase marker. We'll actually mark the positions on the monitor, which is fixed at that point, and we'll look for this change in the movement of the stars. With the rotation of the Earth. These objects would remain fixed for long periods of time, and we knew right away that they weren't stars. I think there's been researchers in the past that have called them pseudo stars.
Now, the other thing I noticed about that video is you describe an anomalous battery drain on video 4.
Yes.
So what happened?
When we were out there, these were relatively close to the shoreline and weren't that far. Some of the hyperspectral cameras we had a full battery drain, and we had checked the batteries before we went out there. So that was something we couldn't explain, and that's happened several times when we have these kinds of encounters.
Now, this is obviously a very common phenomenon with people who try to record with cameras anomalous phenomena. It seems to be able to screw back with us by draining our electrical devices. How often did that happen to you?
Probably at least half a dozen times, maybe.
Yeah, maybe over the period of 2 years, at least six times that we were pretty sure how charged with the charge state of the batteries, and there's no reason that the batteries should have discharged as quickly as they did.
You actually had a time where we actually had a complete power failure, even the generator cut out.
Yes.
Well, that's that famous scene in Close Encounters, isn't it? Where the
Yes.
craft appears and then everything goes dead. I have to admit, there are times in your videos where even you guys sound like you're pretty seasoned observers, all three of you. But there's times when all of you sound a bit freaked out as the objects are coming towards
We
you.
were, and it happened often. We were spooked.
It's like an episode of Blair Witch Project. It's quite funny because on video 20, you see the three objects in a distance. It's about 12:30 at night, so it's dark. It's the witching hour, and I think, John, you say on the audio, we just had a close encounter. It came right up to us on the beach. We ran like a bunch of pussies.
Excuse the language.
It was an embarrassing moment for us. It wasn't our high point.
But the bit I liked was that was effing unbelievable. Clearly, it had a huge effect on you. What you're seeing with your eyeball is more dramatic than what you're capturing with your camera.
Yes, yes, that was that was an event that happened in the roughly in the end of the second month of our research.
It was August 28th, 2022.
Yeah, and it
I
was
remember, I remember the date.
right. It happened just after midnight. It was 12:15 when we actually had the encounter. But that was there was a triangular formation of. We weren't sure if it was a part of one object, but I would say that right now the consensus is that there was three separate objects.
Well, we confirmed it because when we watched that video the second time around after after the recordings were made, is we had panned over to the right, and the objects actually separated, and they rose in elevation. There was a bright red flash, and all the objects were gone.
And they disappeared. Yeah. So, but they remained stable out there for almost 45 minutes. That pattern, and that night, we had wind gusts of greater than 35 miles per hour. So for something to remain as stable as it was, I mean, it wasn't drones, it wasn't balloons, it wasn't
these weren't
any
fixed,
of that stuff.
These weren't fixed positions, and even a helicopter, you're going to have movement with those kind of winds. You're not going to have something.
No sound at all, and nothing visible, nothing in the visible light. It was all in the infrared.
There's one particularly interesting video. I think it's first shown in video 5. It's called Merging Sky Objects with Cohension. And you see a large glowing object that seems to be flickering, and then it moves up and perhaps into another object that seems to be hidden inside the cloud. Can you talk me through that one?
Yes, that one caught us by surprise. We were, we were nearing an area called Democrat Point. And I had been videotaping an object up there, and the object it seemed to have rotation to it. It was giving off like a kaleidoscope of color as it was rotating, and tracking the object. I realized that there was another source of light that was coming down from the cloud layers, and it was getting sharper and sharper, and it seemed to form the same shape as the object that I was visualizing up to that point. And the object never really did come down from the cloud layer, but you could see the brightness, intensity of it. And then this object that I had been tracking seemed like it cohesed or fused with the other object, and they synchronized rotation together. You could see it was twice its size, and they were rotating in the same direction. And then both objects just moved up into the cloud layers, and that was it. We didn't see anything further. But we went frame by frame. We analyzed the tape, the video on it, and I'm dating myself. I keep saying tape. The digital recording, and you could see that, within these frames, you could see that these objects almost, if they weren't cohesed, they're extremely close together when they synchronized rotation.
So one of the questions I should have asked you early on is, you've got these two radars, and what's the benefit of having two radars? And a further question on this question is, how often were you able to confirm that the objects that you were seeing were solid enough to register on radar?
Right. I'll start it out. We have two radars on top of the vehicle. We have one in a horizontal axis and one on a vertical axis. And the reason being is we've got a better cross section of the object. One gets higher elevation, one is vertically mounted. The horizontal one gets a wider sweep and azimuth.
Yeah. So the X-band radar, what we want to do is we want to capture distant ships out there. We're going into phase 2, and we're seeing some anomalous reflections that they're called anomalous propagations. There's something that was discovered back in the 20s. Of a reflected signal using radar system, even the early radar systems, that would not lose energy. They would be reflected back, and the intensity was the same. If a reflected radio wave would bounced off in the ionosphere and came back late, the intensity level, the energy levels would be quite a bit lower than the actual transmitted signal. This is something that we've been seeing on a regular basis.
Can I just ask, though, very quickly, have you been able to get radar tracks of some of these anomalous objects to confirm that they are delivering a radar image? They're solid enough to deliver a radar image?
They're
what we get is we get solid. They're intermittent. The context we get, but they correlate with what we're seeing on the hyperspectral cameras. They'll appear in the same areas.
right at times, and then you'll see reflections in totally different locations. But they don't remain. They don't remain with a continuous sweep. You know, it's you'll see these objects that you'll see one sweep that the object will be there. And they're color coded. The screen itself, the echo trails are red. You know, we have red defined as a solid reflection. When you're doing rain studies or you're doing precipitation, you know you'll have a color, maybe green or orange, indicating that the density is not there. And then these objects are solid. These are solid returns, but they're
That's
not there all the time.
that's what I was coming to. So these aren't rain clouds. They're not
No,
biomass. They're not
no,
birds out over the
no,
ocean. They're
no.
not insect swarms.
Nope.
You've been able to exclude those prosaic explanations.
Yes.
Right, right, and we'll adjust the clutter settings on the radar, make sure that we're not getting C clutter. You know, sometimes wave heights can interfere with the radar signal. We're also able to tilt the radar. We have an actuator, an arm that actually tilts the antenna, the radome antenna. So we're looking straight up into the sky at times. So we can adjust that level.
The other things we're also looking at the ADSB software, so we're tracking, commercial traffic transmissions, so we can visualize that on a monitor. The other thing is for biomass, we could see that with hyperspectral cameras very easily.
And we're also tracking the merchant ships out there as well with marine apps.
It's called MARAPS.
MARAP. We're watching for all these things and trying to identify as much as we can identify.
I really admire what you guys have done, you know, because I've actually priced a hyperspectral camera, and from memory, they're about $50,000. You know,
Yeah,
It's expensive.
they're a very expensive piece of kit. You really have put your heart and soul into this as a scientific project, haven't you?
We have.
Yeah,
we have.
we put our best in it.
It's
Yeah.
a big investment in equipment and a huge dedication. I mean, just to be out there, you know, for hours at a time, sometimes not seeing anything, and it's you know, you got to be patient. You got to be vigilant as far as you know, what
Especially
you're
with
looking at.
researchers like Donna, and we get some other researchers out there, but they're not being paid. They're out there volunteering their time for 12 hours all night long.
That's right. You know,
So listen, I know you boys have had your own weird experience in your youth, and I'm going to ask you both whether you've ever seen a UFO before this Long Island project. But I'm going to go to Donna first. Donna, are you an experiencer? Have you had any experience with the phenomenon yourself before this research?
Absolutely. Right now, I live on a hill on Long Island, off the North Shore, but not directly on the North Shore. And I've seen things in the sky here. I've seen orbs of many kinds, luminous orbs in the distance, and I've also seen people just seeing a red orb. I don't see a red orb. I saw a red orange orb that actually appeared to travel through the trees, and I watched it from window to window on the south side of my home, and I actually saw it. This was like before 12 midnight, and this was a few years ago, maybe 2015, and I actually saw it land on the house kitty quarter to mine across the street. And I tried to wake everyone in my household up, and no one cared. Everyone thought they were dreaming or I was dreaming. And so that's happened quite a few times where I've seen orbs. Usually they are of the luminescent variety, but this one was red orange, like a fluorescent red orange. And it was pretty sizable, though I'm not adept at sizing it correctly. And then, of course, I had a hitchhiker effect during the course of study with John and Jerry. John did as well. And I saw for the first time, and uh, a small orb woke me up right in my bedroom, which was very dimly lit. And it wasn't a very bright orb, and it was a very small orb, about 6 inches in diameter. But I opened my eyes, and there it was, you know, just a few feet from my face. And I watched it move across the wall from my door to the closet area. And then I was just telepathically communicating with it because I didn't know what else to do. And I thought that it was important because I had not seen such a phenomena before. And I thought, wow, I'm learning a lot about high strangeness. And it's really, the more you open that trap, the more you see, you notice, maybe because your mind is tuned into it. And it wasn't, like I said, the light wasn't very light. It had very low albedo. But even though it had low albedo, it was only there less than a minute. And I saw it actually dim further than it already was, and I was sad. This all happened very quickly, and I was sad because I felt like whatever it was departing, and which it did. But I wished it a message. I said, I hope you come back, and I get to know who or what you are. I didn't know any other way to communicate with it other than as a human,
Did it talk back?
but object or an animate object. I'm not sure,
Did
but
it
that
talk?
was
Did it talk back, Donna?
no, and I didn't. I don't think I received any message. I don't feel I've received any return messages, but I don't feel that I felt any negative feeling in return. If anything, it was lukewarm or positive. So I'm still hopeful. And maybe tonight when I retire and go to bed, I'll wish it back.
Now,
We did
Jerry and
we,
John, there's a really interesting story that I understand you have from when you were younger boys as twins, and there was
Mhm.
a very strange visitor came to your door. Are we talking about a Men in Black?
Well, something is interesting is I compare him to I don't know if you ever saw The Exorcist, the trailer for The Exorcist when the priest shows up with the dark suit and the fedora hat, and he knocks at the door and it's very foggy out. it,
that's
it was a trailer for the Exorcist, but that's what this guy looked like. He was in this dark suit, he had a fedora hat, and he claimed he was working with an exterminating company called Slugabug.
if
The only
if you
thing
can,
is he,
if you can believe that.
yeah.
It's
The other
like
thing is he invited himself in. Of course, we were young, and we had a friend over there that was older than we were, and she let him in. So he sat himself down in the living room and he started talking about. He had a suitcase full of materials on UFOs and Edgar Casey and various paranormal phenomena. And he started to talk to us about the phenomena. He would talk to my older brother and say that he saw him as a psychic sensitive or someone who was very intuitive, and he talked about paths we may take in life
yeah,
related to this.
yeah. And the odd thing about it is none of us could remember any physical attributes about this
Couldn't
character.
remember what he looked like.
I remember the hat. He had removed his hat, but I cannot remember what he looked like, and none of us could. We could,
How old were
we
you at
talked
the
about it
time?
many times. Um, I would say probably maybe 7 years old at the time. It was
7 or 8,
seven
and
or eight.
Pat was maybe 12. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was.
The cool bit I like is you did your own research into Slugabug, which is a great name, by the way, for a pest extermination
Yes,
service. Is there a Slugabug?
there was a slugger bug in Florida. We
But
found
much
that
later, decades later.
decades later in Florida, but
There was
nobody
there was
nobody
no
under that
company.
name, and I know the authorities were called in at that time, to investigate it, and nobody else saw this character. And I remember when he arrived, when he left, we had quickly, looked out the windows and the door to see if he got into a car and that sort of thing. We never did see
He was
what
just
vehicle he arrived
he was
in,
just
whether
gone. He was just gone.
he walked. But if he walked, he walked very fast.
Yeah.
Yeah,
And
like I said,
when you
not
boys,
remembering the attributes.
when you were twin boys, presumably reading comics and watching bad TV, were you also interested in UAPs? Did you have any paranormal experiences as kids apart from that weird man in trilby hat Men in Black incident?
Yes, we have. As twins, maybe it's more an
We had the
occurrence with twins, but we've had shared dreams. We've had premonitions that I felt at the time. I don't have them as many of these occurrences now, but as a kid, I remember seeing things that a day or two or a week later they would come to be. Um,
Can I ask you this? Do you think the reason why the phenomenon has shown itself to all three of you may have something, and I'm inviting you to speculate, do you think it may have something to do with the fact that your minds were twigged as young people with the fact that there is something out there that is anomalous and is paranormal? Do you have to have a switch flicked in your head to make you even aware of the existence of this phenomenon?
That
If
was
you
that
look
was
at,
an idea we were considering.
they do have
Uh,
experience, like Gary Nolan. A lot of the people who are in
yeah,
the
That's
world,
true too. Yeah,
I
we've
was
and
thinking
we've
of Gary. I mean, Gary's. I know Gary's come out and looked at your project and been very impressed, and he
yes.
had his own paranormal experience as I think an 11-year-old newspaper boy.
mhm.
He had a gigantic craft hover over him, and he had a kind of a kundalini experience, a vibration experience in his bedroom. Um, what what intrigues me is the possibility that you were sought out by that weird character all those years ago when you were 7-year-old boys, and that might have directed the course of your research. Did you ever think about that?
We've always wondered about that.
We did actually wonder about that. I mean, that kind of got our interest going in things like UFOs or paranormal phenomena.
Yeah, it kind of paved the way. I mean, even looking into technology and so forth, the kind of careers that we chose later on
Yeah,
was
one of the technical careers, because
technical science
we wanted to
related,
understand these things in some way.
right? And we've always had that interest.
they tell this story because it's very pivotal in their life. And
Mhm.
so before they even knew that there would be a nightcrawler research platform, they they told me this story years ago. So it made an impression on them, and I think it did fashion them to have an interest in
You
the exact
pointed that
how
direction.
they're
Yeah, I know this one will drive the debunkers crazy, but I do wonder sometimes whether there is a consciousness that's going around twigging people like yourselves, inserting ideas into your head in dreams or in, semi waking states. And implanting the idea, you guys should take an interest in UAPs, UFOs. I suspect it's not a coincidence that you've got this interest. One thing I want to move to is the five observables. Lou Elizondo talks about the five observables, the various phenomena, the anomalous phenomena signs. And one of the videos that you've got appears to show one of those observables, video 6, NIR water orb and hovering orbs. You see an orb seemingly moving in and out of the water, which suggests that whatever these objects are, they're transmedium. Do you agree?
Yes, because we had a couple of instances where with some of these objects we had noted them touching down on the water, and they would to seem to pass through the water without disturbing the water, which was interesting.
Yeah, and we recorded that several times. You know, uh, we use in that case we use we have a camera. One of the hyperspectral cameras is Swire. It's a shortwave infrared, and what that gives us is it's the water has a high absorption rate at that wavelength, so it comes up black. There's nothing else you can see other than the dark ocean. But if there's an object that is on top of that water, it's seen very clearly in Swire. We can see that object, and if it submerges like we believe it did, it didn't disturb the water. It just kind of shrunk in size, and it seemed to be under the water.
So you do think it actually went into the water and showed no visible. What I'm looking for is it showed no visible disturbance to the surface of the
Yes.
water as it entered.
Exactly.
Yeah,
That's what we
we noted
believe.
we haven't seen any disturbance of the water, which was very odd.
There's another document which I think is really important, and it shows a disc-shaped object, almost a craft-looking object. It has the purplish glow that we were talking about earlier. And if I'm not mistaken, in this still image, it shows a bright underlight. Do you know the one I'm talking about?
Is this
I think it's a still picture. They look like a square inside the circle.
Yes, that's right.
That's the one we that's the still frame.
right?
Yeah.
Okay, so that was a still frame. That was from the observation in August 28th. That was the encounter that we had at the time. There was an object that there under the triangle. There was an object that seemed to uh, literally fall out of the sky, and Donna observed it first, and we were able to track it with the cameras, the infrared cameras, the night vision cameras, and this object seemed to move closer to our location, to the shoreline, and then back off again. And what we ended up doing was we were hitting it with a visible torch, 100,000 lumen light, and we were all able to see the reflection. It was no longer infrared. We could see the reflections from the flashlight, and I was able to take still images from it and enhance those images. And it appears like there's some kind of an opaque or translucent dome around a polyhedral shape in the center of it.
That's what excited me about that still video, and you see a small orb that comes out from a distant triangle, and it's coming towards you on the
Yeah,
beach.
yeah,
And
yes.
John, you light it up with a gigantically powerful torch.
Yes, and with there was four of us out there that night. There was we had Donna, we had Sue, Gerald, and myself, and we all had our hyperspectral cameras. We had the night vision cameras with us, and once I hit the object, once I hit the object with the light, everybody was able to see these objects. And I think Donna can, you can attest to that also. That the object was giving off a reflection.
But
That was.
my goggles, my IR goggles, failed.
Mhm. Oh, that's right. Her particular.
Those
Yeah, during an
Yeah.
incident with Donald Stoker, has three of our cameras.
One thing I want to caution is if you talk over each other, you audio sound deaden the other person. So
Exactly.
can I just get Donna's account, please?
Well, while John and Jerry were having this encounter, Sue, she's a registered nurse, and I were prepping the nightcrawler for other other protocols, and we actually at some point heard a scuffle, and we looked and we saw John and Jerry running, but not fast because they couldn't. It was beach sand they were running through. We were parked right at the opening of the cut, and I knew, and so did Sue, that something had happened, but we had no idea until John and Jerry calmed down and told us what had happened. That they had spotted something in the sky. Something came out of the water. They both one fell, then the other fell. Temporarily, they could not move. Then they were able to get up. They thought maybe this was a weapon. They weren't sure, so they wanted to get back to the nightcrawler. And so we saw them. We heard them huffing and puffing. Then we saw them, and we realized that they were distressed, so something was up. And so they updated us. And then I don't know. We spent like maybe 10 minutes, 15 minutes discussing it. And then we all hightailed it back to the beach. And we still saw that formation, those 3 points of light, but not with the eye at all, only with the working cameras, because my goggles had failed back at the nightcrawler for a reason I don't know why. And then there were other failures that night. So you do get that. You get the battery drains, and we did also experience equipment failure for no reason.
And so, John and Jerry, that's where the comment was made. You guys were obviously very upset about what had happened. You'd been paralyzed. And so that's why you ran like a bunch of.
Yeah.
Exactly.
I'd say pretty much.
So
And
describe to me, John and Jerry, what happened when you were actually paralyzed, presumably by this object that came towards the beach?
It's not something even today we can't really wrap our heads around as far as uh, what came over us, what it was that produced that effect, but it was a physical effect. It was a biological effect. You know, I tried to move away from it. I had observed a rectangular beam of light that was being. It seemed to reflect my IR rangefinder on my lunar optics night vision, and every 1 second flash, I could see this object getting much closer to our location. Finally, it overloaded the cameras. The cameras were washed out with it looked to me like the infrared light. When I pulled the camera down, I couldn't see anything other than just sky. But in the cameras were actually overloaded by some kind of an infrared radiation, infrared energy. And as I turned to move away from the shore, I said to my brother, I said it's on top of us. And as I turned, my legs gave out. I collapsed. I just collapsed onto the sand, and I couldn't coordinate my legs under me to pick myself back up.
And this happened to both of you?
Yeah,
Gerald,
when I heard John yell and that he couldn't get up, he couldn't move. I didn't understand it, so I tried to pull him back up, and he was starting to regain his strength. It was less than a minute. The effect. Then I collapsed, and I lost all strength and muscle tone in my legs. I couldn't do the same. I couldn't coordinate my legs underneath. I'd use my arms to actually pull myself in the sand. And while this was happening, there was something happening to our camera, which the camera was working intermittently, but it recorded an event. It recorded something that entered the optics, uh, some sphere of light that got beyond the iris of the camera,
which is bizarre because the iris, I was used to be a camera technician. I used to repair these cameras, service these cameras before engineering, and the intensity of the light, with the iris motor, you have a diaphragm in there that closes down, and it closes down instantly if there's intense light to protect the CCD. So it's a loop that the gain control that actually shuts this stuff down and adjusts the light level coming in. This seemed to be working. The iris motor seemed to be working, but the intensity of the light was beyond. It looked like it was beyond the iris motor when we looked at the playback. Almost looked like there was an intense form of light inside, just beyond the iris motor.
So you know what I mean by the sixth observable. There's a lot of talk that there's not 5 observables, there's 6, and the sixth observable is biological effects. You guys may, in fact, have suffered the biological effects of a UAP.
It could be.
That's what that's what we believe.
Yeah, I mean,
there's no other there's no other cause. It doesn't even make sense. The two of us experienced the same thing, and it wasn't just bio effects on us. When we were looking at the object, when that object finally disappeared, there were 2 crustaceans on the beach, a krill and a shrimp. They were both glowing intense luminosity in the IR range, and we collected those 2 specimens. They were a few feet from where we experienced this incident, and they were supercharged with this IR energy, which makes no sense.
What could possibly cause that?
Well, that's the thing. It wasn't bioluminescence. Bioluminescence occurs at a frequency of 450 to maybe 577 nanometers. And that's in the visible spectrum. These things were, the wavelength. These were in the infrared, and that makes no sense whatsoever.
Yeah, so they were dead, these creatures?
They were dead, and we had brought them back in the specimen.
Desecrated, you said.
They were we brought them back in the specimen container, and I had examined them under a microscope. They were desiccated. Both of them had large openings in their thorax. It looked like the internal organs avulsed. It looked like a thermal expansion effect of the insides being bursted out.
So there are so many incidents, and I could keep on going all day, guys, but honestly, there are so many incidents in what you've described and shot in your videos. There is one that intrigued me, though, because it's actually not over the beach. It's video 36, Holbrook incident, and you see a huge light over a backyard. What's that story?
Okay, so this is what we think is another example of a hitchhiker effect. And this time was videotaped on the cameras of the RV. I'll let John explain.
Right. So we had gone out there earlier in the night and had returned home at, I guess, around 1:30. And I live roughly about 25 minutes from the research location at Rob Moses State Park. So the vehicle had the cameras running. There's 4 different cameras. They're night vision cameras, fixed cameras on the platform on the RV. And each one is at different positions: the passenger side, the driver's, the front and back. And they were recording overnight. And within about 2 hours of the vehicle being parked, I had turned into bed, and we noticed that, the next day I checked the video because it was giving an indication that it recorded something. And I checked the recording, and it started out with we have 3 street lights over the vehicle. One was in front, roughly about 300 feet ahead. There was a street light behind the vehicle, directly behind, literally over the RV. And there was another street light on the passenger side that was probably another maybe 200 feet away from it. And all 3 street lights shut down at the same time that night. And you could see an interference pattern developing in the video cameras, almost like it's a radio frequency interference of some sort, electromagnetic interference. And you'd see on the back of the frame structure of the RV, where the camera was overlooking, you'd see a blue light appear. And the blue light grew, got brighter and brighter, turned into white light. And and it remained there for a period of time, and then you could see slowly, you could see the street lights recover one after another very quickly, sequentially. And the only thing I can do that, these are, I believe they're sodium vapor lights, and they have on top of the top hats on these hoods of the lamps. There's a photo sensor, and that photo sensor is designed to sense sunlight in the morning and shut the lights down. So something in the, I believe it was in the infrared spectrum, had triggered those sensors are also sensitive to the infrared, the near infrared. So it tripped those sensors, and all those lights shut down at the
So,
same time.
not only were you followed home by whatever the phenomenon is,
Mhm.
it was also not visible. The only reason you were able to see this is because you had the cameras that can see in that
Right.
infrared spectrum.
Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And another interesting thing is the only way you can shut these photo sensors down is that light has to be above those hoods.
The hoods, yeah. I mean, the photo sensors are straight up. They're vertical. They're at a zenith to the sky.
Right. Donna, one of the things I'm interested in is here are you guys off the coast of Long Island gathering 50 at least extraordinary videos of anomalous incidents. Have there been, and I know there's been times where you've wondered whether somebody else is taking an interest in what you're recording? Have there been unknown planes around the area during the period when you've been filming, perhaps also taking an interest in the phenomenon that you're observing?
Well, I would say none that we were really able to identify, although there was one day, and this again was back in August 2022, so that would be the second month into the phase one study, where John witnessed some extraordinary activity. And John and Jerry and I, we had already reported to the park police and other local officials, local only, that we had seen some strange things already in the sky with IR equipment, and did they know what this could be? And we were looking into what the drone laws were and that information. And John saw some craft in the sky, and he saw search beams that were focusing on the sky, not on the ocean. So if it's Coast Guard, you would be able to get radar hits. If it was Coast Guard, they would be focusing on the water. So we thought that that was very unusual, and we thought, well, what timing? The week before, we had went to the park police and let them know that we are seeing something that we have not yet been able to categorize or identify.
John and Jerry, there's one video I'm interested in, video 9, and it's the 16th of January 2023. And there appears to be an unknown plane adjacent to orbs that you're taking an interest in. Do you know the one I mean?
That's the was that the Tic Tac?
Yeah,
That might have been the Tic Tac video.
No,
Where
it was a nighttime image, and it seems to be an aircraft that's adjacent to orbs. So it's
Okay, yeah, I think you're talking about the aircraft that we had. We used the 60 times zoom. We zoomed in on it. It looked
yeah,
like a small dot of light. We wanted to identify it, so at
yes.
60 times zoom, we could easily see an aircraft and its navigation lamp.
fuselage.
So we saw this aircraft, and then what we noticed was about four orbs of light, almost looked like fireballs that were trailing it. And we had watched to see if the aspect ratio would change, so we'd see maybe the navigation lights were hidden, but these never showed any navigation light. These lights, these four orbs of light. The plane though was very obvious with the navigation light. So these things we couldn't identify.
Right, and they would seem to be in the flight path of the plane as well.
So that's the thing that interests me about all of this. Let's do a closer, if you like, because I've gone way over time, but I've been so fascinated by what you've told me, and thank you so much for sharing it.
No problem.
What I find fascinating about all of this is we are talking about an extraordinarily sensitive and busy area of airspace in the continental United States. It's probably one of the most busy areas of airspace, both military and civilian. Do you agree that categorically what you are recording raises flight safety and national security issues?
Oh, absolutely.
I believe so.
There was there's an interesting incident that occurred. I think it was during the 1990s. The Flight 800 crash.
I covered
Right.
that story, TWA 800. Yeah,
Yeah.
they put the crash down to kept on wiring arcing inside the fuel tank. I did a whole
Right.
That
The
was,
story.
and
center,
that, but
the
there was
centrifugal tank.
right, and that was never determined as a certainty. That was the educated guess of the National Transportation Safety Board. But they know that the explosion that started the incident started in the center fuel tank. Now the interesting thing is that can also happen from an impact. Is that there were like maybe 700 witnesses, approximately around that number, who saw a flash of light heading up towards the plane. Obviously, they told people that
And
their
and
perception was off.
can I tell you, boys, I'm so pleased you raised this because I was scared to raise it in case I sound like a nutty conspiracy theorist. I covered that story and I interviewed people about the crash of TWA 800. And I remember speaking to people telling me that they saw a flash of light coming up towards the aircraft. And it was very quickly shut down in the NTSB investigation.
Mhm,
And there were,
mhm,
obviously there was this argument that it was a problem with very badly covered wiring. They didn't have Teflon coating on the wiring in the proper way, so it cracked
mhm,
and caused an arc.
mhm.
But yes, there is a question mark in my mind that this is the area for where one of the most mysterious aircraft crashes of
Exactly.
all time took place, right in
Yep.
this flight path area, and it's never been properly explained. I think we should just leave it as an open question whether
Yeah.
there
Mhm.
was perhaps a collision with an anomalous object.
It's certainly something that should be considered
Yeah.
as a
Absolutely.
possibility.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, it was within about less than 7 miles of where we
And
were researching.
it's out rare we're seeing these objects, and of course, could have been a collision, maybe even an accidental collision. It's possible.
Sure. And I know you guys can't talk about it because you've been asked not to, but my own sources in the FBI are telling me that the feds are taking a very, very close interest in your work. And I know you're talking about a new phase to your study. What's next?
Yes.
Are you going to go out on boats? Are you going to be using drones? What's the next phase of your study?
Well,
John had summarized it. He could probably.
we initiated a phase. So we actually started, of course, this is a point now in time where, you know, we're experiencing some funding issues and so forth, getting the ARB out there and getting enough volunteers and so forth to spend time with it. But you know, phase two is going to involve, which actually has involved already, is remotely operated hyperspectral camera systems. So these camera systems can be visualized or viewed from any location.
And they're fully integrated with a small millimeter wave radar
Right, and
systems.
they all contain a millimeter wave radar system, which gives a 3 mile range in the line of sight and in the visual range of the cameras. So as a detecting source, the cameras can be tracked. There's a pan and tilt operation on some models of it, um, but they can be put in areas that we have no access to or we're not frequented to, or popular areas, maybe areas that have higher incidences of these sightings, and utilized, to try to identify the possibility of whether or not we need to send a laboratory to that particular location and do a full length study. Um, Again, this is, we're also using extensive use of millimeter wave radar because we kind of suspect that what we're getting back on some of these returns is that there's a delay in the signal, and this is something, like I said, it's been talked about since the 1920s. We're just wondering why, and we've had a couple of really interesting radar anomalies where we would use the background ships in the background that were basically 9-12 miles out and use that as a reference, and our returns would show elongated track patterns, almost like they were being delayed because we have a mechanical circulating radar system.
And
So
just
we're
to,
using millimeter wave
and
radar.
just to emphasize the point that you were making, one possible explanation for those delays is gravitational lensing.
Exactly. That's what we're kind of suspecting this point. So we have
And
equipment.
what would cause gravitational lensing? Let's take this to its logical conclusion. Some kind of propulsion device,
Some
perhaps?
kind of propulsion system, and which correlates, we believe, with these odd frequencies that we've been getting as well. You know,
Wow.
so we're trying to put this all together as a means of detection of these objects, using fixed system satellites, using GPS locators and that sort of thing, because the same would happen to any radio signal as well as light, in the full electromagnetic spectrum. We can see the same distortion with lidar.
John, Jerry, and Donna, I just want to take my hat off to you guys. What the work that you have done is exceptional. It's
Thank
astonishing,
you.
and
Thank you.
it exemplifies everything that I think all of us want to see in citizen science trying to validate and investigate the phenomenon. So, congratulations to you. And I think I speak for everybody watching this. We really are excited by the work that you're doing. If I can promote or assist in any way in helping you get further publicity on this issue, please let me know. I'm very, very excited by the methodical quality science that you've done here. I'll be interested to see how the splenetic debunkers deal with your work, because you've done some phenomenal research. And my hearty congratulations to you. I'll get spanked by NewsNation for letting this go on so long, but the
Thank you,
bottom
Ross.
line is I've loved this conversation and I want to
It
do
was
it
a lot
again.
of fun for
So
us.
Yes.
keep in
And
touch.
we appreciate all the support. Tom.
Yes, we're very happy to be on your show and
Absolutely.
participate in this. This is great.
Thank you so much for talking to Reality Check, and we'll have you back on again soon. Thank you so much. Hello, and welcome back to Reality Check. Today, we've got Andrea Lani to speak to, Dr. Andrea Lani. Dr. Andrea Lani is an Italian-born, Belgian-based aerospace scientist with a PhD in engineering sciences. He's worked with institutions such as NASA, Stanford, the NATO Science and Technology Organization, and the von Karman Institute, leading the development of models and software for hypersonic re-entry, space weather, and solar phenomena simulations. He's been published in the world's top journal for aerospace engineering, the prestigious Progress in Aerospace Sciences. He has co-authored more than 100 scientific papers so far, and he's currently working on an EU project developing a magnetic shielding prototype for space vehicles. Now, this is where it gets interesting, because outside of his official work, and Andrea is at pains to emphasize that his esoteric and paranormal interests have no connection at all with any of the official institutions that he works with, Dr. Lani has been a lifelong experiencer of UAPs and other anomalous phenomena since an extraordinary event that he and his family witnessed when he was an 8-year-old boy. A lot of his private research focuses on using deep meditation, inspired by protocols developed by the CIA, the Central Intelligence Agency, in the 1970s. They're the so-called Stargate protocols. And he uses this to gain an understanding of the anomalous phenomena that he says he's experiencing, including time anomalies and even psychic interaction and communication with non-human intelligences. And like the solid scientist he is, he's exploring ways to verify and measure the phenomenon. It's his work with hyperspectral video imaging of his brain during deep meditation that I think perhaps you'll find most intriguing. I am delighted to announce that we have a sponsor on Reality Check, and that sponsor is none other than a martial arts god that when I was a little boy, I worshipped intensely. I had his posters on my wall, and he inspired me to learn karate and other martial arts as a young teenager. I'm talking about Chuck Norris. When I was a little boy, there was one movie that I went to watch about 5 times in 1972 called The Way of the Dragon. And it was Bruce Lee and Chuck Norris facing off against each other in the Colosseum in Rome. It was just mighty stuff. And would you believe Chuck Norris is now 84 years old. And while I have broken hands and knees and ankles because of my foolish interest in karate, whacking boards in a dojo late into the night, Chuck Norris's body defies explanation. The man is 84 years old, and yet he's still got the vigor of a man 30 or 40 years younger than him. He's still kicking butt and working out. And what's amazing is he's stronger, he can work out longer, and has plenty of energy left over for his grandkids. He did this, he tells us, by making one change. And he says he still feels like he's in his 50s. His wife's even done the same thing as well, and she's never felt better. She says she feels 10 years younger. Her body looks leaner, and she has energy all day. And Chuck's made a special video that explains everything. And make sure you help us and Chuck by watching it. If you go to chuckdefense.com/Ross and click in the link below in this video, it'll change the way you think about your health. Now, once again, that's chuckdefense.com/Ross. Click on the link in the description below to watch the video. You won't believe how simple it is. Just a reminder, the legendary Chuck Norris is a whopping 84 years old, and yet he's got more energy than me. And his body may be broken, but for some reason, he seems to be able to keep on going. I want to know his secret. I'm going to click on that link. What he's discovered that he could effect dramatic changes to his health simply focusing on three things that sabotage our body as we age. Watch his method by clicking on the link in the box below, chuckdefense.com/Ross. Dr. Lani, welcome to Reality Check.
Thanks so much for having me here.
So, Andrea, tell me a little bit about this incident that happened, I think, when you were an 8-year-old boy. This is the first time that you were twigged to the anomalous phenomena.
Absolutely. So it was 1983, and it was during August, and I was basically on a balcony with my parents, and suddenly it was during the night, maybe like 10 o'clock or something. It was already dark. There was absolutely nobody around in the street or in other balconies, and suddenly we noticed this object that appears at the same altitude as our balcony, so about 15 meters from the ground, like, I don't know, 45 feet or something like that, and like 10 meters in front, so like 30 feet or something. And as soon as I look at the object immediately started spinning, became luminous, and I'm talking about a spinning like almost like seeing a flying turbine, like thousands of RPM. And actually, I also remember that while it was spinning, I noticed already back then the wobbling around the axis of rotation. And while spinning, it shrank progressively till when it actually disappeared while emitting a flash of light. And then after that, I turned on my left and I asked my mother, "Did you see that?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "What was it according to you?" And she said, "Oh, maybe it was a falling star." Now, my mother is no scientist. I was 8 years old, but I already knew that was not a falling star. Just standing.
So how many people were there with you at the time this phenomenon showed itself?
Well, my parents. So we were 3 in total. My father doesn't have particular recollections. My mother vaguely remember the phenomenon, but the problem is I don't know exactly. I was looking at the phenomenon. I wasn't looking at what they were doing. So maybe my father was distracted and my mother only got a glimpse of it. But what I know is that it was not a falling star because it was standing in front of us. So,
was there a noise?
I remember no noise whatsoever. But one thing that was interesting is that few months after this, let's say, experience, I started losing a little bit of sight, and I had to wear glasses. And that actually, I always found very weird the fact that I was the only one in my family, and I have a very large family, like 17 siblings on the side of my father and 5 on the side of my mother. I was the only one at the time wearing glasses. And but I never connected it to this event. But recently I saw that I read somewhere that there are other people who actually experience something like that. After a close encounter, they lost a bit of sight, and then I connected the dots. I said, wow, this was just few months after this event.
Now, Doctor, one of the things as a scientist that I'm sure you'll want to understand, and I hope you understand, I've got to be skeptical. You know, this is an account that is quite extraordinary, because I think what you say is that you've developed throughout your lifetime psychic abilities, that you have an ability to use your mind in ways that go beyond what we understand the brain to be capable of. Did you have those abilities before this incident? Are you aware as a child before this incident having these skills?
Absolutely not. And actually, these abilities came very late in my life. I think the first experience that I can associate to some sort of precognition was in 2016. And this was a few days before the terrorist attack in Brussels. I remember I was walking, it was a Sunday afternoon. I was walking next to the central station, and suddenly I meet these two women. They approached me with a very weird English, and I said, okay, you can talk Italian, I understand. And then they basically told me, well, we are teachers and we are here with our classrooms, and we want to go with the kids to visit the Museum of Napoleon. And I said, wow, you're really lucky, because I work in the village next to Waterloo, and I go to Waterloo every single day for lunch. So you are asking the right person, you know? And so I said, okay, where are you staying? They said, well, we have a hotel nearby the central station. I said, well, you know, you just take a train from here, take a bus, and then you go there. And then they told me, but you know, we are in Brussels and we would like the kids to try the metro. When they told me metro, I had this flash in my mind, and I thought about the Paris attack, and I thought about, I had an image of a metro blowing up. And I didn't say anything, but I tried anyway to discourage them to take the metro. So I told them, I think if you try to take the metro early in the morning with all these kids, you will get in trouble because it's really busy. So what happened is, the day of the attack, which was 2 days later, in which actually they bombed the metros as well, my mother told me about an interview that she saw to an Italian guy who survived. And while looking for this interview, what I actually found online was an article talking about these two teachers with their kids, showing a picture saying that basically they actually took the metro, and they took actually the metro before the one that was bombed. So I don't know if I played a role in that event to prevent something to happen, but definitely I had a premonition. So that was the first time.
So you would call that a precognition, if you like. You had some kind of telepathic pre-sentient notion of what was going to happen.
I think so.
So let's go back a little bit in your childhood, because I know that the incident that happened to you when you were 8 years old, that's not the only incident, is it? And you also had an uncle who reported seeing something very similar in the same place where you and your family had your experience.
Absolutely. So this happened a couple of weeks after we had already left, and he was on the same balcony, originally alone, and he was looking up, and on his left, high in the sky, about 150 meters, let's say 450 feet or something, he saw this object arriving very slowly, rotating, and it was like blasting some beams of light of different color. So it was a traditional, let's say, dome with a saucer under it, spinning very slowly. And he called the wife. He said, "Come to the balcony, look up. Do you see it?" And she saw it as well. And then they look at it. He said for about 45 seconds, more or less. This was his perception of time. And then the object suddenly increased the rotation speed, became like a glowing red ball of light, and darted off at an incredible speed. After this, yeah.
It's an amazing story. I mean, did he photograph it? Is there a corroborative witness? His wife says she saw the same thing, I suspect.
yeah, the wife saw the same thing. He didn't have time to take any picture, but they both experienced some sort of hallucination during the night. So he, while waking up, he opens his eyes and he has the impression of seeing a face of a human, but made of fire with long hair that was like trembling like that. And then he was like shake up a little bit and it disappeared. And then he was talking to the wife and the wife said, this night I had a very strange dream. I saw Jesus Christ made of fire in our bedroom. And so by connecting what he saw with this guy with long hair and what she saw in her dream, it's an interesting coincidence.
So Andrea, you're a scientist. What has been the big incident in your life that convinced you that you were seeing something that is genuinely anomalous? Obviously, as an 8-year-old boy, that's quite an amazing incident, but I can imagine there's been more recent incidents. Take me through the array of phenomena that you've experienced.
Yes, so I had to wait till 2017 to actually have another UFO encounter, again, a very close one. And this time it was very different. So basically I was stargazing during the night in this house. And I had this thought, how cool would it be to have the same experience that I had when I was a child, now that I'm an aerospace engineer and I could, look at details and understand a little better what I'm looking at. And then I basically went to sleep at the time that I was my ex-girlfriend, already lying on the bed. And she made me notice a very strange sound. It was like a high pitch kind of squeaking, and I couldn't associate it to any machinery or anything. Consider it was 1 o'clock in the night, and so I was basically staring at the ceiling. At a certain moment, I see a single ray of green light entering from my window, and in the matter of 1 second, the whole room is completely enlightened in bright green light. And so I look at her, I said, let's go to the window, let's see what happened. And I remember she basically turned her face to the wall and said, no, let me sleep. I didn't want to investigate that. I just wanted to see what the hell was going on in my backyard. So I pulled the curtain and I saw 2 discs of green light, very bright green light, they were moving together, flying over my backyard. The perception of distance for me was like maybe 10 meters or something of this order. Because if they were really high in the sky, they were gigantic. So I tend to believe they were very close and they were relatively small, about 2 meters in diameter each. How I can estimate that is that I saw them passing over the roof of the neighbor, and I know the size of the facade of the neighbor, which is more or less 6 meters. So, and then I went upstairs to try to see if I could see further, and I couldn't. But, that was interesting to have this kind of experience immediately after having asked for it.
Now, Andrea, you actually became a scientist, didn't you, because of that incident that happened to you when you were an 8-year-old boy?
Absolutely.
Can you tell me why? What was the reason?
Well, let's say that it got me interested in technology, got me interested in physics, astrophysics. And when I had to decide what to do in life, my thought was, I want to get to a point in my life in which I understand what I saw that day, because I understood that was very anomalous. It was like almost peeping through a door that lead you somewhere else. And and basically when I had to decide what to do, I was undecided between astrophysics and engineering, aerospace engineering, and they suggested me to go towards engineering because I would have had more chances to find a job as an engineer than a physicist. And I followed that. The funny thing is that later in life, I ended up working together with astrophysicists as well. So now I'm working a little bit on the modeling of space weather and a little bit on the modeling of hypersonic flows around space vehicles.
So I've got to ask this, Dr. Lani. In the course of your work for NASA or any of these agencies, have you ever come across an aerospace technology that you think defies conventional explanation?
Absolutely not. But I have to say, I never had the chance to work on classified technology. So it was mostly, simulation of some experiments which are non-classified. You can publish them, and it was rather ordinary, technology for hypersonic vehicles. So yeah, definitely not.
Where do you stand on the speculation pushed by people whom I know you know, David Grush and others, who are suggesting that there is this secret reverse engineering program going on inside private aerospace and indeed in sections of the US government and intelligence community that is concealing the retrieval of non-human technology? Do you find it plausible?
Yeah, absolutely. I think that there have been during these decades a lot of high-profile people who came out with insider information, and I don't know why I would doubt this kind of people. So.
And what do you think the attitude is within your profession to your attitudes towards the paranormal and anomalous phenomena? Is it received with skepticism, or is there a greater willingness to be open-minded about the possibilities of this kind of phenomena?
Yeah, what I can say is that in my own environment, what I saw is that a lot of people, of course, is skeptic, but also a lot of people have no knowledge whatsoever about the phenomenon. They've never researched anything. Maybe they saw sometimes something popping up on the news or in a local newspaper, but they never research it actively. But then once you focus the attention on some people, on some of the stuff, then they get interested. And I have during let's say the last few years, I have seen astrophysicists, I have seen space engineers, people that, in my environment, if I would tell, that this person actually is very interested in that and actually had experiences, they would not believe it. But, so there is a group that is growing of people that are getting information, are getting experiences also within the environment in which I'm working, which normally is very, stigma-driven and very close-minded.
I was going to ask, is there a risk of blowback for you in speaking so candidly about your experiences with what, after all, can easily be stigmatized and treated with taboo and suspicion?
Yes, there is a risk. I received pressure before from multiple sources, but I have to say, it comes to a moment in which people need to be aware that these phenomena are real, and there are a lot of people, and I'm not talking about just thousands, millions of people who are having experiences, and we are not talking about just Chinese balloons. So somebody who has experiences, especially somebody like me, also with a scientific background, that has maybe more tools than others to evaluate if an experience is anomalous or just ordinary. I think, people in this position have to have the courage to come out and say, okay, I had that experience, and I can tell you, at least for what I know about physics or technology, that thing was not normal, non-human probably. So.
Okay, I'm going to show you a video that you very kindly sent me earlier, which is an attempt, I understand, by you to explain the phenomenon. The video of you versus the journalist. So there's an image of you on the left, and your whole head is very largely illuminated with a yellow light, a golden light. And on the right, there's what appears to be a woman's face. And I presume this is some kind of infrared or perhaps a hyperspectral imaging camera. Talk me through what we're looking at.
Okay, so first of all, just a little bit of story about how I got there. So in 2023, I got connected with this Italian journalist called Sabrina Pieragostini, who actually wrote about 4 books about UFOs and some other phenomena. And she involved me actually in her last one. She was looking for somebody writing the foreword, and we connected. I shared some of my experiences. She said, would be nice to have you writing the foreword. So that's how I got connected to her. And then after that, she said, I know some people that would be really interesting to do some tests with you. So what I told her is that, since some time, I have these experiences in which after I during meditation, whether I do it alone or with other people, we sort of create some sort of connection with other beings. And so people feel energies, have visions, and I did also some tests at the Institute of Noetic Sciences in which they did some experiments with EEG on 11 meditators. And what they saw is that for each of the 11 meditators, their brain waves changed dramatically when they were doing a meditation like freestyle, the way they wanted, and a meditation like that I had pre-recorded on video saying explicitly, I'm going to connect you, what I call it a Stargate, or let's say a portal, or some kind of communication channel. And what they saw is that for each of them, if you look at the brain waves from delta to gamma, there were considerable differences for all of the participants. And some of them also had experiences like the one that I, that people meditating with me had. So at some point, I was looking for more evidence. And so thanks to the journalist, we met in Milan with two guys. One is a forensic technical consultant, is also an electronic engineer, and the other one is a physicist or an engineer. They work together and they develop actually these hyperspectral cameras that can see beyond the visible, so both in ultraviolet and infrared. And what they did is they placed two cameras. One was a polarimetric camera mounting a sensor which is actually used by space agencies, and another one was another camera, hyperspectral, and they did different kind of measurements while I was meditating. So when I meditate, I instantaneously drop into some state and I connect. And what they could see, so first of all, they also tested the journalist as a point of reference of the day in the same place, same time. And but they had already tested about 30 people before. And what they saw is that for people who don't have any contact experience or any meditation experience, they all fit the same kind of energetic signature, which is the one that you see for the journalist in the video. So basically, you see the energy is mostly concentrated in the eyes. So the highest level of energy, which is visualized in this case with white light or golden, if you want, is concentrated in the eyes. And then there is maybe some little activity. But in my case, this energy is distributed equally over all my face, except for a region which is very well defined that almost look like a mask around my eyes. And it never changed. And the interesting thing was that even when I'm not meditating, this high level of energy is present. So it's like a permanent feature that is anomalous. They've never seen something like that, that I have.
And was that with the hyperspectral camera, or with the, what did you say it was, the polarimetric camera?
Polarimetric, like to measure the polarization of light. But also in that case, it works in the UV and infrared range. So.
And so this one we're looking at now, this is the hyperspectral camera, and that shows the golden light right across your head, apart from your eyes. And the same eye light is emanating just from the woman's eyes in her section. Was she meditating at all?
Not really, no. But another thing that I have to say, so you're looking at the energy signature, and what they are measuring is actually the biophotonic field. So we emit light, and so but we emit light also in the infrared and the ultraviolet. So that's what they're interested in, and that's where they see things happening. So another thing that you see happening in my case is this toroidal field that forms around my head, and also occasionally forms a sort of cross. And then I remember when we were doing the test, the guy said, "Whoa, look at that. You see this cross?" And then they say, "Well, it's almost like you are targeted by something." And then the other one said, "Yeah, but it looks like it's coming, out of your face. It's not really something coming from outside." So
what is it, Dr. Lani? Explain it to me, please. You're the scientist. What does it mean?
What I can say, I have my own theory. What I can say is that, in spiritual circles, they always talk about raising your vibration through meditation, increase your frequency, your energy. And I think you can get to a point in which this becomes measurable. So also, since centuries, people have been talking about kind of enlightenment, but is this measurable? Maybe this is a measure of some kind of enlightenment, or a measure of a process towards what they call enlightenment. Definitely is not a glitch. It's something, they did the test 3 times, and in between they tested the journalist. The settings of the camera were completely the same, and the difference in energy is really, like, if you see between the dark and the light in there is really consistent. So it's like they say, this is really something.
So what's your hypothesis when you're meditating? Are you aware that you are communicating with something somewhere else?
Absolutely. Actually,
so what
yeah,
are you feeling? What's going through your head?
I got into meditation with the specific purpose of making connection, but it took some time to have the haha moment in which you really feel something. You feel energy, you see stuff, and then they tell you, we'll give you a sign, and then this thing happened. And anyway, so in the process, at this point, because anyway, I've been doing this already for 4 years. At this point, I just close my eyes, and basically I can connect whenever I want. And when I decide to connect, I feel a sort of electric impulse. And sometimes this electric impulse makes my head twitch a little bit. And you see it even in these videos. And it's something really physical. It's like you create some sort of energetic connection, which manifests itself in your body being traversed by high frequency currents that in some way they don't burn me. It's like, if you have high frequency currents going through a material, unless this material is a superconductor, it will generate heating. And I know about superconductors because I'm working in projects dealing with that. So for my understanding, you can get to a point in which your body works as a superconductor for these energies. And then the fun begins. So I don't know if, I think I got to that point. I don't know how, I don't know why me. There are many other people, I think, who have similar experiences. It's just that maybe they're not so vocal, and maybe they don't have a chance to do this kind of test. Luckily, I know engineers, I know people with technology, and I can experiment.
So when you communicate, I'm really interested in drilling down into what you say happens when you meditate. Are you saying that you are consciously engaging with something that is an intelligence that is non-human?
Yes, that's what I'm saying. And what I can say, or what, from my point of view, from my understanding at the moment, we are not just engaging with one kind of intelligence. It's very busy out there. And so people have been trying to, communicate with angels, with gods since millennia. And I believe this is an actual possibility. You can actually engage in this kind of communication, and they are able to interact even on the physical level with you. And I make you an example. The first time that I had this connection during meditation, so I felt this extraordinary energy. My eyelids started flickering in an uncontrollable way. And then I started having these very vivid visuals of entities, but I couldn't see them like in details. I could just see robed entities emanating some light on my left in blue, on my right in green, and then I saw a face which maybe you will show later on. But then I asked, okay, but then they told me the message that I was receiving is that you can do this kind of meditation with other people, and they will have similar experiences as you will have, and you can use this for healings. And then I said, okay, well, healings, let's try with myself. At the time, I had a ligament injury on my left wrist. It was a relapse. The previous time I had to take a cortisone injection, and this was already, almost a year before. And then I had another accident and a lot of pain. Sometimes I couldn't even the day before, I couldn't hold the cup without feeling pain up to my elbow. So I said, okay, if you can really heal, can you heal this one? And then what happened is I did a meditation, and I even forgot exactly what was the purpose of the meditation. I had connection, and then I'm walking out from the park, and I hear this internal voice like, check your wrist. I was like, oh, yeah. And then I move the wrist in whatever way, I put pressure, I lift weights. It was solved, and it never came back again. So
Now, can I put on my? I feel duty bound to be the skeptic because um, you're a scientist. What you're claiming there is obviously quite extraordinary, and you're not the first person, by the way, Dr. Lani, to tell me you've had phenomena like this. Interestingly, one of the people that I've spoken to, and he told me this in great detail in another interview, was Professor Gary Nolan from Stanford University, not talking about healing, but talking about vibrations. I think the thing that really struck me from what you were saying very early on was this description of your whole body vibrating. Um, and it's a very common phenomenon described by people who believe that they're having encounters with non-human intelligences. Why, as a scientist, do you believe that what is happening to you is most likely engagement with a non-human intelligence? Just to put my debunker skeptic hat on for a moment, isn't it possible that this is some kind of dream state or hallucination? Why do you believe it's real?
well, if this dream also manifests in your life with physical events like a healing, or like they tell you go to this place and something will happen, and then you go to that place and you see signs related exactly to the thing that they told you a month before that would happen. I mean, we don't have the time to go into all the details, but I had all kinds of experiences that gave me absolutely no doubt that I'm in contact with something which is non-human, or maybe it's cosmic, maybe spiritual, whatever it is something outside the visible world.
Now, this is what I want to explore with you, Doctor, because I'm really struck. I was listening to a Joe Rogan interview the other day with Robert Epstein, and he was talking about the idea of the brain being a transducer, and the idea that essentially a lot of memory is not stored in the brain, he believes, but he speculated that perhaps what the brain is a device that allows us to convert energy to communicate with somewhere else. And a lot of this goes through in modern mythology, and a lot of the stories that go back in, even ancient texts. They talk about the importance of the pineal gland in the brain. Can you talk to that, please? What do you know about the pineal gland, and basically why is it relevant to you having the experiences that you've had? And let's talk about the images that you've been able to get showing what happens to your, is it pineal or pineal gland in your brain?
Yeah, so I believe we function like some sort of antennas, and we constantly emit signals and also receive signals. And then if you're able to tap in specific frequencies, maybe you can receive communication from elsewhere, right? So basically these tests were conducted in the same day in which I did the test with this hyperspectral camera. And they are just looking at the data in a different way. So they are able basically to visualize the activity in terms of frequencies of whatever part of the image they focus on. They take a video in full spectrum, and then they focus. They can focus on your eyes, they can focus on your brain, they can focus. So in that picture, they focus in particular on a place close to the pineal gland. What they found also in previous studies is that when they analyze meditators, they see some sort of torsional field generating in this area. And you see the spinning of this energy, or let's say this structure, and they can visualize it. They can visualize basically different frequencies with different colors. So in these images, what you see is exactly that. You see some a torsional kind of field spanning different frequencies and different colors. But the interesting thing that I've never seen before were these flashes of light that blasted off my body as soon as I connected. So at the beginning, you see the image is like gray, black and white, with just some little activity in here. That's how you should see it normally. But once I start meditating,
and just so I'm clear, in the images that you've sent me, there's a screenshot in black and white of you meditating, and you see a green spot at the point on your skull where the pineal gland would be located.
Yeah. So indeed, so you cannot drill a hole in your head, but that's the closest location in which you can monitor the activity around that area, you know.
And so what's the camera that's being used there? Again, is that the hyperspectral camera?
Yes, it's a hyperspectral camera. We're talking about cameras which are custom made. They use also special software and special hardware. Like the computers have to be cooled down more than traditional computers because they use very heavy post-processing algorithms. And yeah, so they can look at whatever. They also look at my eyes. Unfortunately, I don't have any picture for that. But they look at the light coming off my eyes. And normally, with people, they see that both in amplitude and frequency, the light coming off the eyes are different, like different amplitude, different. They are not in phase. But as soon as I start meditating, they saw that actually they overlap perfectly, both in amplitude and frequency for both eyes. But the frequency it's much higher. It's like order of magnitude higher than the frequency they normally see of the light coming off the eyes of other people. So,
and is this a frequency that you've been able to measure? Like, do you know the frequency at which the pineal gland is operating when it's having this connection?
No, I don't know. I should ask these guys. But yeah, normally they look also within the range 0.50 hertz because that's also the range of the brain waves. So they can also visualize the activity of the different brain waves, delta, theta, alpha, beta, gamma. You know, so
do you believe what you're seeing there in that imagery is visual evidence to show that your pineal gland is doing something separately from the rest of the brain, that it might be perhaps, for example, as Robert Epstein speculates, it might be operating like some kind of transducer?
Absolutely. That's what we believe.
And so what fascinates me is that through history, even ancient history, there's imagery even in the Egyptian antiquity of what looks like the pineal gland on some of the walls on the ancient monuments in ancient Egypt. And you see this image of what is structured like a pineal gland. Do you think there is a knowledge that was held by the ancients that we perhaps in our modern era have lost?
Yeah, absolutely. So they consider the pineal gland as a sort of point of contact between worlds, like our material world and the spiritual world. And even if you find this reference in the Egyptian, but you even find it in Christianity, and it's a bit more hidden. But they absolutely know what they talk about when discussing about pineal gland.
So let's talk about the weird, anomalous phenomena that you've experienced in your life. Obviously, you said that you saw another UFO in 2017. Did you have any anomalous phenomena in that period between the age of 8 and in 2017? Or was your life pretty normal up until then?
I didn't see UFOs, but I had some kind of sleep paralysis experiences in which I would wake up. This happened 3 times in Turin and twice or maybe 3 times in Belgium, in Brussels. So this was around 1999, 2000, so the years in which I was writing my thesis, basically. And so I woke up completely paralyzed, fully conscious, feeling as I was levitating. I couldn't move even a little finger, trying to open my eyes, nothing. And I would feel this very intense vibration throughout my body at a very high frequency. I've been in earthquakes. This was something completely different, and it was coming from inside my body. And at the same time, I was also feeling a high-pitched sound inside my head that was increasing in frequency by the second. And so I panicked, and I started praying, Mother Mary, and it stopped. And then it happened again within a few weeks. And again, I panicked. And after that experience, I started researching online. Internet was not as developed as now, but you could find some information. So that some people were saying, well, sleep paralysis is just a psychological temporary disorder of your system. Some were saying, well, it can be an intermediate stage before an out-of-body experience. And some other were talking about abductions. Now, in abductions, sometimes people reported, including also maybe Gary Nolan, seeing entities around the bed or something that I couldn't see absolutely nothing. I would just feel this very intense, vibration and sound. And so it happened again. This time I tried to control the fear, and I said, okay, let's see how far this goes. And actually, no, it just stopped again. And it happened again like 6 years later when I was in Brussels. I wasn't surprised. I was actually excited in the moment. I said, yeah, maybe this time something happens. And then it stopped. And then it happened another time, and that's it. So I would say, I didn't have any other. Well, I had another experience which was interesting in South Africa in 2006. So basically, we were driving, and we noticed that there was a bunch of whales that came very close to the cliffs. So we stopped the car and we started running towards the cliff to see. It was like 15, 20 whales, even coming out of the water. And I was the last one, and I started running. When I arrived there, I basically stepped on something, bumped into something, and my body completely lost the balance. And I felt, I had this flash in my mind, I'm dead, because there was no way that something could balance back my body at that speed to not fall down the cliff. It was really a straight fall. And I felt this pressure, a strong wind pushing in my chest and putting me back on my feet. And so at the time I didn't say anything to anybody. I think not even to my girlfriend. But this thing remained in my mind. It's like in my mind I was already dead. There was no way I could stop myself in the situation. So
You mentioned earlier that when you prayed to Mother Mary, it went away. I mean, are you a religious person, and do you think that there is a religious connection here? Could the Catholic Church have a point?
Well, I mean, I was brought Catholic. I have always been a Catholic, let's say, up to my mid-20s with a lot of doubts. But I love the personal, the personality of Jesus as somebody, sort of embracing this unconditional love, this peace, this whatever. But I always felt a disconnection with the structure, the structure of power created by the church. So I don't consider myself religious, but I am very attracted by Jesus' teachings, even though I also know that there have been some manipulation on the original message. And for instance, the early Christians believed in reincarnation, believed in meditation, and also in healing practices. And all this was wiped out from the Bible during the Nicene Council with Constantine I. So when you talk about Christianity, one should really go back and study let's say the very ancient text, and not this gospel that we see now, which is a bit the manipulation, I would say.
Well, do you think that what you're learning through your direct meditation, you believe, with some kind of non-human intelligence, I mean, could it be what Christianity and other religions you believe are trying to suppress?
It's some, there is a very like thin line between what people like me are connecting to and what angels or spiritual entities that have been in contact with people and they are reported in religions. So I don't know. For sure, there is a level of suppression, but it's coming out because people are having these experiences and they're sharing them. So,
as an Italian, do you believe the Vatican knows a lot more about anomalous phenomena than it cares to publicly let on?
Well, I'm not the one that should say that, but yeah, probably a lot of people report this information, and people with knowledge, not just me that reads the news, or the reports of others.
So let's talk about what you're seeing when you're doing your meditations and engaging with what you believe is a non-human intelligence. When you see these beings, are they humanoid or are they something else?
Well, I have to say, in 4 years, I meditated every day at least once. My meditations typically are very, very short, like maybe 10 minutes. Sometimes when it's a group meditation, and I did a lot, especially at the beginning, it can last also longer, maybe an hour or something. I've seen a lot. I've seen really a lot. Some look like some of these Indian gods. Some don't have really a shape. In some cases, you just hear them somehow in your own voice. In some other cases, they are non-human, insectoids, for instance, or
Mantis?
mantis, for instance, or also ants. Some other look like humans. Some other look like these gods that you see in the Egyptian hieroglyphs, like Anubis, like with a or with a lion head or with a cat head. And I mean, I'm not the only one having these experiences. A lot of people in my circle, and I know really hundreds of people, let's say, that have similar experiences and sometimes see even the same entity within the same meditation. So,
Can I ask you about this, Andrea? I'm really struck at the moment how all around the world there are people. Since I first talked about it, I talked about blue beings. And I said it almost on a whimsy. I just mentioned casually that there were people reaching out to me who claimed to be in contact with blue entities. And yet, what's fascinating is I get the impression people all over the world, like dozens of people, have contacted me with stories of being downloaded with information, of given creative ideas or intellectual notions, in some cases, incredible scientific gifts in their mind. What do you think's going on? I mean, obviously, you believe as a child what you were shown when you were 8 years old. That wasn't a coincidence, was it? I mean, do you think that phenomenon was manifesting itself to you specifically?
yes, I do think so. It was almost like inspiring me. I mean, it's like it shows some sort of oversight that go beyond time. It's like I have to come here and show you something so that you will later on make this choice at that specific moment in your life. And
So you're feeling guided. You're feeling that the purpose in your life is intrinsically connected to that experience that you had when you were an 8-year-old kid.
if I hadn't had that experience, probably I wouldn't have become an aerospace engineer. I would be in a completely different path.
I'm really struck by that. I'm really struck by how many people I meet and I talk to who tell me that their experience with the phenomenon, it's not just, say, a UFO. Often it's weird experiences like you've described, vibrations, being in their bed and being paralyzed and then having experiences with what they believe are entities, beings of some kind. But what fascinates me is how people seem driven by a purpose after they've had those experiences. That's been your experience, clearly.
Absolutely. So I know that there is this narrative about the threat posed by some of these entities, and I do believe that maybe some of them are really a threat for us, or at least controlling and trying to manipulate us in some way. But I also believe that some of them are absolutely positive and benevolent, doing healings, inspiring people. And you just look at history, you just look at religions, there is always the balance between angels and demons. They call them in different ways, but it's always the same. So there is some sort of evil force or self-serving to the least, And then there is another one which is benevolent and try to inspire and do something good. So
Have you encountered evil forces in your time navigating through these experiences?
yes, but I've been in situations in which I've interacted with accidentally, let's say, with some negative entities, and the way it manifested for me is with extreme pain. Like just for me and for other people, I had situations in which I participated to a meeting, and it was like 45 people, all with some spiritual background, and there was one person that didn't show the face, and I thought immediately this person is doing something, and immediately after I felt sick. My friend felt sick that was in my room, and another friend that participated in her own house, she also felt sick. And then I actually closed my eyes, I meditated, and I saw a dark entity. And when I sort of remove it, everybody felt better. Like my friend had a pain here, it disappeared like that.
Now, Andrea, you understand conventional science, traditional science, mainstream science, so-called, would dismiss what you say and say it's not real because
Absolutely.
and yet you are to some degree quantifying it, you're measuring it, you're detecting something happening when you are engaging with this phenomenon. You can actually see it with the imagery that you've very kindly shown us. One of the issues that's fascinating to me as a journalist is that science struggles to understand not just the issue of UFOs, UAPs, flying saucers, aliens, ETs. It struggles to understand anything anomalous or paranormal. And yet there's a reality there, isn't there?
Yes, and the good news is that now we have some technology which can give us insight into this. So we cannot maybe see the entity itself, but we can study the interaction. We can see that if when somebody is experiencing something, there are some measurable effects. So this is it's a game changer in the discussion. One thing is to just say, okay, I see something, but another thing is to show something like I showed with these videos, in which you see a level of energy which is completely anomalous with other people. So there must be something in there. So, or either I am a different kind of human, or there is something in there. So,
well, there's also the fact that if you don't look, you won't find. And one of the things that I find really interesting about a lot of establishment science is it has an obdurate resistance to even considering the possibility that the sort of things you're describing are real, doesn't it?
that's why actually, even though I have positions which are a bit different from the one of Avi Loeb, who is really nuts and bolts kind of scientist, but I really appreciate what he's doing in trying to call out, this mainstream science, and said, look, if you don't look, you don't find. If you would put a fraction of the money that you put in the CERN experiments or in the SETI program into this, and I can say, for instance, into scanning with MRIs people that have experiences, or in using these hyperspectral devices, or for whatever. I mean, you would find a lot of answers. So, and at the moment, a big obstacle for people like me is that public funding is not available for this kind of exciting investigations that can change mankind from one day to another, like in a way that has never seen before. So this sort of how can I say, infuriates me, the fact that we are hostage of this mindset. And so the only chance you have to make this kind of investigations, which require a lot of resources. So as I said, this technology is expensive. Like a hyperspectral camera like that is a 50,000 euro device. Then you have to post-process the data. It takes you weeks. If you don't find funding privately, you basically, or you put the money yourself, then you cannot advance. And so we are sort of hostage of the mainstream position of people that don't see the benefit of something that is really, in which there is something to investigate.
So what's going on, though? I mean, do you think it's just science having discomfort with something that it can't immediately quantify or measure? Or is there a more deliberate conspiracy going on? Do you think there is some in science who know about this phenomenon but want to suppress it?
I don't want to enter into this territory. What I can say, the simplest explanation is just cognitive dissonance. It's like you are brought up since an early age within you are sort of programmed to think that reality is only what you can see with your eyes, and then you figure out, for instance, that you cannot see the signals that your Wi-Fi is operating. But they're there. There's something, there's something physical. You can measure it. You cannot see it. So, you have to go beyond what you can see with your senses or feel with your senses and explore a little more.
If I go, though, through the logical narrative of what you've described very kindly in your account to me today, the implication is that the intelligence that manifested itself to you when you were an 8-year-old boy deliberately seeded you with an awareness of anomalous phenomena with the intention of twigging your consciousness. And I wonder sometimes whether that's not being done to a lot of people that contact me. I get overwhelmed by people contacting me, telling me their experiences, and I find it very exciting. I love sharing and hearing what people are describing to me. And being, I can tell you, my friend, a dogged skeptic who's been very resistant to even considering the possibility that any of this might be real, what strikes me is the voluminous quantity of witness evidence where people are describing having their awareness of something else twigged by a major event, such as what you've described. And then they devote their lives to a particular field of study or investigation, or in some cases, creative arts. They're painters, they're musicians, and they're inspired to develop that art. But what fascinates me is it possible that what you're describing is some kind of intelligence that is actually trying to seed humanity with ideas?
Yeah, I do think so. And it's possible that they try to do it with everybody, but some people just don't listen, or dismiss certain phenomena that, maybe sometimes they saw something and they didn't devote attention to it, and it could have played a role. And
give me an explanation, though. Why wouldn't they be more overt? If they want us to be aware of the other realms that we're talking about here, if they want us to learn how to meditate and to learn how to engage with them, why not be more overt?
Well, I think they stick, or at least the benevolent one, stick to some degree of non-intervention, and so they try to limit as much as possible. They give breadcrumbs, but in a way that you have to understand that is a breadcrumb. And some people just don't see it. And they do it over and over again. And the moment you start understanding what you are looking at and you start following the breadcrumbs, then they lead you somewhere.
The implication, though, behind what you're talking about is that there must be, this is what you believe as a scientist, there must be a way of scientifically explaining the phenomenon that you're describing, that this encounter perhaps with the divine or some other realm that you're having, it might actually be scientifically investigatable and measurable. It's just that we're not looking.
Absolutely. And I think it will get better and better with these new technologies. Just think about the pilots. They made an upgrade to their FLIR system and suddenly they see objects all the time. It's you just have to look in frequencies and spectra which are beyond the visible, and you will hear stuff, you will see stuff, and so on. I just want to also
well, no, please finish what you were saying, because I do have another question, but I just want to hear the rest of what you're saying. I think it's important.
One of my early experiences, so I had this healing in my ligament injury, but then a couple of days after that, I had another phenomenon which was really interesting. Basically, I stopped meditating, and then I hear this sound. I was meditating with the headphones. So I hear this modulated sound. It almost sounded like a robotic voice, but I don't want to go that far. But let's say very modulated. And I said, what is that? And I look at my phone. There was absolutely no app. There was no YouTube, no nothing. There was absolutely no app that was working at the moment. But this sound was coming, and it was not just a single sound. It was really modulated. And then I unplug the headphones, and the sound was still there. So it was not in the environment. And it lasted for some time, maybe a minute or half a minute. And then I said, wow, it almost looks like some form of communication, no? And then I remember that, so in let's say 1992, I joined a rock band. I was the new drummer, okay? And so the first time we went to the rehearsal room, we decided to record on a brand new cassette. And at the end of the recording, there was a sound which was very much like this one. And at the time, there was no reason why this sound had been recorded, because during the playing, we didn't see anything strange. We didn't hear any strange sound. But then there was this strange sound for minutes. And then we look at each other and said, maybe it's something paranormal, but maybe it was a spirit. I don't know. We don't have any explanation. But then, then I made a connection later on. I said, well, this sound reminds me of something. Oh, yeah, it happened in 1992. It is very similar. I don't know the logic of this, but, I see a connection.
But more importantly, what fascinates me about you, Dr. Andrea Lani, is you are motivated, more motivated than most scientists, to investigate this phenomena because of those experiences you've had. You're convinced they're real, and you feel, and I admire you for this, you feel an obligation to talk about it publicly, even though you risk a high degree of stigma and ridicule for doing so.
Yes, I have to say I'm also lucky, because I know that there is people who are having these experiences and they are sort of alone. They don't talk to friends or family or whatever. They try to live their experience by themselves. But I have a circle of people that I know, also scientists and engineers and whatever, who are having all kinds of experiences. And so I'm not alone. And there is a lot of people out there that is like me, wants answers. And the only way to find answers is to seek them. So
one of the things you've talked about, you hinted about this earlier, was these weird synchronicities where you've been told to go to various places or to see certain things. What's the weirdest anomalous phenomena experience that you've had?
Well, I can mention the case of the cat that got trapped into my house. So basically, this was on the 21st June 2020. I did a meditation in a park nearby with 7 friends, all women. And during this meditation, one of these friends went into a trance channeling state. So she was taken over by some entities actually, that spoke through her. They were speaking a little bit in English and a little bit in some other language that we couldn't understand. And but in the meantime, we were also feeling energies, something very physical. And this lasted for about 25 minutes. I myself was completely drained. I couldn't move after that. The energies that I felt were something that I never felt before. Then I took a walk after a while and said, okay, let's try it again. This looks like fun. And we reconnected, and the same thing happened again. And especially, I have the audio, but it's something that I wouldn't share for the moment. But these entities had something to say to me, particularly, through this person who was channeling. So what happened is I went home, and I found my neighbor in front of the door. I never had any interaction with this neighbor. And she said, well, somebody from the house in front of yours saw my cat entering your house from the window. I had a window open, very slanted or something. The cat somehow seemed to have managed to enter. So we entered the house. I said, okay, let's look for him. So we go room by room. We close the door. We go in the basement. She was screaming the name of the cat. the cat is nowhere to be found. I say, sorry, maybe your friend, didn't see correctly. And then 3 days later, so for 3 days, I had no sign whatsoever of life from a cat. Like, there was nothing wrong. I couldn't find anything around. And sometimes I was going to rooms again and close the door and check everywhere. But, I had little furniture. This was a big cat. It was impossible for a cat like that not to be found in 3 days, okay? But so at the time, I was meditating, and the message I was receiving is, this cat has been sent to your house. And remember, the cat entered the house when we were having this experience in the park, to give you evidence of the non-linearity of time, which is a very strange message. And I had a friend in Italy. This guy is a photo reporter, and he's also a medium, trained also in shamanic stuff, Reiki, Theta healing, whatever. And he was giving me a message like, yeah, it's almost like the cat is stuck in between worlds. And so the fourth day, finally I find some poo, let's say, upstairs, and then a ripped off trash bag in downstairs. So, and the door was closed between the two. So I don't know how he managed to do that, but it's something else to be investigated. But so I put my laptop to record during the night to try to catch the cat. I put some food. And then after 56 minutes in the video, which is 9 hours, 18 minutes, 18 seconds, the cat enters the room, jump on the sofa, and then for 6 minutes, the video freezes. And then after that, the video accelerates 100 times. So you have to accelerate to let's say, slow down 100 times to see one single frame in which you see the cat in the middle of the room, and then it disappears, and then it comes back in the room. And I've shown this video to a lot of people, physicists and stuff, and they all got very interested. This could be the famous, some people talk about the Schrödinger cat.
The Schrödinger cat. I was about to say Schrödinger's cat. Yeah.
This could be a variation, let's say, some sort of quantum cat in which, the observer was the laptop, and he observed something very weird. And then if you think about it, you saw first the video freezes. So it's almost like time freezes. Then it accelerates, so time accelerates, and then it goes back to normal, so it slowed down. So it was consistent with the message that I received for, three days before. And I would have never thought I could catch something like that on camera.
Dr. Andrea Lani, I have to say, your views are provocative, but very thought-provoking. And I must confess, hearing your candor is what I respect and admire most. It's not often that a scientist who's worked with NASA, somebody who's worked in astrophysics and mechanical engineering at such a high level, is prepared to talk about the limitations of science in describing anomalous phenomena. Maybe one day you might be the guy that provides us with the breakthrough that helps us understand what's really going on.
Yeah, I don't know. It's not important. It's me. It's important that, science engage. And there are attempts, by Gary Nolan, by Avi Loeb, by, a lot of the people that also, So something is changing. And if we get some public funding for research, it will change even faster.
Well, just in closing, do you think that the phenomenon is being more overt, that it's trying to let us know it's there?
Yeah, it really looks like you really see some sort of momentum growing. It's my vision is that I see this snowball that is rolling down, and there is no way to stop it at this point. So,
well, sir, I certainly hope you're right. It'd be great to get some answers. Dr. Andrea Lani, thank you so much for sharing your stories with Reality Check. And I sincerely hope that one day you get those scientific answers that you so obviously crave.
Thank you very much. It was a very, very nice conversation.